On the bluff overlooking the facility, the chill wind tugged at Ravina's cloak as she stood atop the rocky bluff, her piercing eyes locked on the secure facility below. The compound sprawled beneath her like a fortress, its layered defences a testament to the secrets it protected. From her vantage point, she watched the helicopter land, its rotors kicking up dust and debris as it touched down in the facility's central courtyard. The trader, shackled and dishevelled, was escorted from the chopper by Shade and Karina. Ravina's lips curled into a faint, humourless smile as her keen eyes followed their every move. The two operatives moved with purpose, their vigilance apparent even at this distance. But it didn't matter. They didn't see her. They didn't know she was there. Ravina's fingers brushed the pendant at her throat, a relic imbued with tracking magic. It had served her well, leading her here, allowing her to monitor the transfer. She watched as the trader was taken inside, the heavy gates closing behind them, with a finality that even she had to respect. "Impressive," she murmured, her tone devoid of admiration. It wasn't impenetrable, no place ever was, but it would require careful planning. For now, she would wait. The game was far from over. Ravina turned on her heel, her cloak billowing behind her as she disappeared into the shadows of the surrounding forest. Her destination was clear, Draven's realm. It was time to demand answers. And results. In Draven's realm. The air in Draven's fortress was thick with an oppressive heat, the dim light casting jagged shadows across the stone walls. Ravina's presence was announced not by words, but by the sharp click of her heels echoing through the grand hall. Her expression was a mask of icy fury, her eyes blazing as she strode toward Draven's throne. Draven sat slumped on his ornate seat, his once imposing figure now haggard and worn. The loss of the celestial gem had drained more than his resources. It had sapped his confidence, leaving him a shadow of the ruthless ruler he once was. But Ravina saw no room for sympathy. She only saw failure. "You've kept me waiting," she said, her voice a low, dangerous hiss. She stopped a few paces from his throne, her posture rigid, her aura commanding. Draven's eyes narrowed. "Ravina, I don't recall inviting you." She laughed coldly. "An invitation? Don't flatter yourself. I'm here because your incompetence has jeopardized everything I've built. The Voidstone shipments have stopped, my operations are crumbling, and you sit here." She gestured sharply at his throne, like a defeated dog licking its wounds. Draven's jaw tightened, a flicker of defiance flashing across his face. The celestial gem was stolen. Without it, accessing Nethoria is... "Spare me your excuses," Ravina snapped, her voice cutting through the hall like a whip. She stepped closer, her presence looming over him. "You lost the gem. You let a petty thief outmaneuver you. And now you have the audacity to sit here and whine about it?" Draven rose from his throne, his fists clenched, his pride stung. "Do not presume to lecture me, Ravina. You think your little drug empire makes you untouchable?" She met his glare with one of her own, unflinching. "My empire," she said, enunciating every word, "is the only reason you still have allies in this realm. Without my resources, your power would be nothing but a memory. So, you will fix this. You will find a way to supply me with Voidstone again, or I will ensure that whatever shred of influence you still possess is erased." The silence that followed was heavy, the air crackling with tension. Draven's eyes burned with resentment, but he knew better than to lash out. Ravina was right. His position was precarious, and her support was the only thing keeping his enemies at bay. "Very well," he said finally, his voice low and measured. "I will take action." Ravina smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Good. And let me be clear, Draven. I'm not interested in promises. I want results." Without waiting for a response, she turned and swept from the hall, her steps echoing in her wake. Draven watched her go, his expression dark and brooding. Her words had struck a nerve, igniting a fire of anger and desperation within him. She had pushed him into a corner, and now he would act, recklessly, if need be. As the shadows of his realm seemed to close in around him, Draven muttered to himself, "You'll regret underestimating me, Ravina." The spark of chaos. Outside Draven's fortress, Ravina paused for a moment, her cold smile returning. She had planted the seed, forced his hand. Whatever Draven did next would undoubtedly create ripples, and she would be watching, ready to exploit every misstep. The war was coming, and Ravina intended to be on the winning side, no matter the cost. The early morning sun cast long golden shadows across the Echo Division courtyard, its warmth doing little to ease the chill in the air. The hum of quiet activity filled the space, but it was subdued, marked by the absence of Rose and her team, who had departed the previous night. The pack moved with purpose, preparing for the day, their camaraderie steady but tinged with an unspoken tension. In the heart of the workshop, Maelorion stood near the glowing portal room, his expression calm but resolute. The faint shimmer of the portal's energy bathed his imposing figure in soft light, a stark contrast to the weight of the news he had delivered mere hours ago. The Guardian Council had summoned him urgently. Reports of the Specter Wolf rising in Alphiem and the delicate balance tipping across the dimensions demanded his immediate attention. Aeliana approached quietly, her platinum hair catching the light, her movements graceful but purposeful. She carried her staff loosely in one hand, the other brushing the fabric of her intricately woven robes. Her expression was serene, but her eyes betrayed a mix of worry and determination. "The council will expect us soon," Maelorion said, his voice steady. "Time is not on our side." Aeliana nodded, her gaze drifting across the workshop. "I know, but there are matters here that remain unresolved. I've already spoken with Clora and the others. They understand the situation, but there's one more conversation I need to have." Maelorion inclined his head slightly, his piercing gaze softening. "With Gunner." She didn't answer, but the faintest trace of a smile touched her lips before she turned and walked toward the training grounds, where Gunner's presence was unmistakable. Gunner stood in the corner of the training grounds, his broad shoulders tense as he inspected the freshly upgraded armory rack. His cybernetic fingers ran along the edge of his weapon, Starbreaker, his thoughts clearly elsewhere. The distant sound of footsteps drew his attention, and he looked up to see Aeliana approaching. For a moment neither spoke. The unspoken weight of their shared history hung in the air, heavier than the crisp morning breeze. Aeliana stopped a few feet away, her staff resting lightly against the ground. "You're leaving," Gunner said finally, his tone low but steady. It wasn't a question. Aeliana nodded. "The council's summons cannot be ignored. The rise of the Specter Wolf across my realm is no small matter. If we delay, the consequences could be catastrophic." Gunner's jaw tightened, and he turned his gaze back to Starbreaker. "And Earth?" "Earth will not be forgotten," she said firmly. "I'll continue to push for the Council's support for Echo Division. The enchanted ammunition production, the secure gateways. It's all in motion. But I'll need time to ensure they honor their commitments." Gunner's piercing blue eye met hers, the intensity in his gaze softening only slightly. "And you think they'll listen to you?" Aeliana smiled faintly. "They will. I've been known to be persuasive." The corner of Gunner's mouth twitched in what might have been a smirk, but it faded quickly. He exhaled sharply, the sound carrying both frustration and understanding. "This place is going to feel a lot quieter without you here." Aeliana stepped closer, her expression softening as she placed a hand gently on his arm. "You've led this team through battles most wouldn't survive. You don't need me here to remind you of your strength. But I'll be back, Gunner. I promise." His gaze dropped briefly to the ground before returning to her. And if you're not? Aeliana's hand lingered on his arm for a moment longer, her voice quiet but unwavering. Then I trust you to carry on without me, to protect what we've built. For a moment it seemed as though Gunner might say something more, but the sound of Maelorion's voice calling from the portal room broke the spell. It's time, Maelorion announced, his tone even but commanding. Aeliana let her hand fall away, stepping back. She hesitated, her expression shifting slightly, as if weighing her next words. Take care of them, Gunner, and take care of yourself. He nodded once, his voice gruff. You too. As Aeliana turned to leave, Gunner watched her go, his expression unreadable. The weight of her absence settled over him even before she disappeared from view. The shimmering portal cast an ethereal glow as Maelorion and Aeliana stood side by side, ready to step through. The Pack and Echo Division team gathered quietly nearby, their expressions a mix of respect and unease. Maelorion addressed them briefly, his voice carrying the weight of authority. The Council will deliberate on the matters we've discussed, but the defense of Earth now rests in your hands. Trust one another, and you will endure. Aeliana's gaze swept across the group, her eyes lingering on each of them before settling on Gunner. This is not goodbye, she said softly. Only a necessary step forward. You've already proven you can face what lies ahead. With a final nod, Maelorion stepped through the portal, his form dissolving into the shimmering light. Aeliana paused, glancing back one last time, her expression unreadable but filled with quiet resolve. Then, with a graceful step, she followed. The portal closed behind them, leaving the team standing in silence. Gunner exhaled slowly, his cybernetic fingers clenching briefly before relaxing at his side. All right, he said, his voice firm. We've got work to do. Let's not waste time. The team dispersed, their movements purposeful as they prepared for the challenges ahead. But for Gunner, the morning felt heavier, as though the absence of the Guardians left a void not easily filled. Yet, beneath the weight, a spark of determination burned brighter than ever. The sound of muffled clanking echoed through the brightly lit garage as Darren stepped inside, his boots scuffing lightly against the concrete floor. Rows of tools lined the walls, each meticulously arranged, and in the far corner stood the Wolfmobile, its sleek but rugged frame coated with a fine layer of dust from weeks in storage. Darren let out a low whistle as he approached, running a hand along its side. Well, you've seen better days, he muttered before calling out, Keebler, you around? A faint hum of energy and the sound of rapid typing came from a workstation on the other side of the room. Eli appeared from behind a cluttered table, her silver hair pulled back into a loose ponytail, and her violet eyes sparkling with curiosity. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and the slump in her usually sharp posture hinted at how overworked she was. You rang? She said, smirking faintly as she wiped her hands on a grease-stained cloth. Her gaze shifted to the Wolfmobile, and her eyebrows lifted. Wow, they finally let you bring it out of hibernation. What's the occasion? Darren leaned against the vehicle, crossing his arms. Gunner's orders. He wants this thing ready to roll. Says we might be needing it soon. Eli tilted her head, stepping closer to inspect the UTV. Define ready, because last I checked, the frame on this thing was solid, but it could definitely use some upgrades. That's exactly what I'm here for, Darren said, flashing a grin. Gunner wants it stronger and faster. Think you can work your magic? Eli snorted, pulling a wrench from her belt and tossing it to him. All right, hotshot. If you're going to stand there, you might as well make yourself useful. Start by loosening the bolts on the front frame. Darren caught the wrench with ease, smirking. You're putting me to work now. I thought that's what geniuses like you were for. Genius is delegate, Eli shot back, already pulling a schematic from her workstation and pinning it to the board. And I'm not lifting that frame with my bare hands while you're standing there looking pretty. He worked quickly, the wrench clinking against metal as Eli began inspecting the turret mount. She sighed heavily as she scanned her notes, muttering under her breath. Engine's getting a kinetic energy booster and I'll have to rebuild the turret controls before we can install anything fancy. Darren paused, leaning on the vehicle. What about the minigun? Still in pieces? Eli sighed again, rubbing her temple. Yeah, stabilizing the energy cores a pain. I'll prioritize enchanting the 240 Bravo for now. You're going to have to be patient for your dream turret. Darren frowned, noticing the tension in her voice and the fatigue etched on her face. You doing okay, Keebler? You look like you've been burning the candle at both ends. Eli gave him a tired smirk. You think this place runs itself? Between the upgrades, the weapons maintenance, and keeping the tech in one piece, I'm lucky I even remember what sleep feels like. Well, how about you delegate some of that genius stuff to me? Darren said, handing her the wrench with a grin. I'm more than just a pretty face, you know. Eli rolled her eyes but let out a small laugh. Fine. Loosen the other bolts while I prep the alloy mix. But if you break anything, you're explaining it to Gunner. Deal, Darren said, getting back to work. But only because I don't want you collapsing on this thing. We need you in one piece. The garage filled with the sound of tinkering. Eli occasionally barking orders at Darren, who, to her amusement, complied with minimal complaints. The hum of her magic blended with the clatter of tools, creating a rhythm that filled the room with purpose. The hum of overhead lights flickered slightly as Darren stepped back, admiring the work they've completed in early hours of the next morning. The Wolfmobile sat front and center, its reinforced frame gleaming faintly in the fluorescent glow. Tools were scattered across the floor and workbenches, evidence of a long night's labor. Eli was slumped over her workstation, her silver hair falling loose around her face, dark circles etched under her violet eyes. She stared at the engine mounted on a stand, her focus sharp but visibly strained. Darren let out a low whistle, stepping closer. Well, you really worked this thing over, huh? Eli glanced up, her smirk tired but present. Frames reinforced, engines out, and if you give me another hour, I might actually have this thing running like a dream. Darren leaned against the workbench, crossing his arms. Or you might pass out right here. Seriously, Keebler, you look like you're running on fumes. Eli groaned, rubbing her temples. I'll sleep when the pack isn't relying on me to keep their equipment from falling apart. Darren raised an eyebrow, his voice softening. Look, you've done enough for now. The frame's solid, the engine's out. It's already a hell of a lot more progress than anyone expected. Go get some rest. Eli shook her head stubbornly. I'm fine. Just need a little more time. Darren stepped in front of her, crossing his arms and fixing her with a pointed look. Eli, if you keep pushing yourself, you're going to burn out. Go lie down for a bit. I'll keep an eye on everything. She hesitated, exhaustion warring with her pride. Finally, she sighed, her shoulders slumping. Fine. 30 minutes. But if I hear you've touched anything enchanted, you're dead. Noted, Darren said, grinning as she shuffled toward the cot, tucked in the corner of the garage. As Eli collapsed onto it, her breathing evened out almost instantly, and Darren shook his head, muttering, Stubborn as hell, but she's earned it. He returned to the workbench, carefully sorting tools and cleaning up the workspace, making a mental note to leave the magic alone this time. The garage remained quiet, save for the faint clinking of tools and the soft sound of Eli's steady breathing. The reinforced Wolfmobile stood as a testament to their teamwork, ready for the battles to come. Gunner was seated in the war room, his sharp blue eyes scanning reports of recent supernatural activity when the talisman around his neck began to glow faintly. The warmth of the enchanted item was unmistakable, its activations signaling a direct message from Aeliana. Pressing his hand to the talisman, Gunner closed his eye, allowing the connection to form. Aeliana's calm but urgent voice filled his mind. Gunner, I need you and Eli to come to Alphiem at once. The council has called for you. Gunner's jaw tightened. What's going on? There's been a development, she replied, her tone heavy with meaning. I can't explain everything through the talisman, but the situation is critical. The portal in your secure portal room will open shortly. Be ready. Understood, Gunner replied aloud, already rising from his chair. We'll be there. The connection faded, leaving the room steeped in silence. Gunner turned to face Clora and Desera, who were seated at the long table, poring over mission details and logistical reports. Both looked up as Gunner straightened, his expression calm but firm. I've been summoned to Alphiem, Gunner said, his voice steady. Eli and I are heading out immediately. Clora's brows furrowed, her hazel eyes sharp with concern. What's going on? The council needs us, Gunner replied. Aeliana wasn't specific, but it's serious enough to call us both. You'll hold things down here. Desera nodded, her expression resolute. Understood. Do you have an estimate on how long you'll be gone? No idea, Gunner admitted, but you know the protocols. Keep the team focused, and if anything changes, you have full command authority over Echo Division. Desera, the seasoned second-in-command of Echo Division, gave a sharp nod, her presence exuding calm leadership. Understood. We'll maintain operational readiness. You focus on what needs to be done there. Clora, the pack's female alpha, leaned back slightly, crossing her arms. She was the picture of tactical precision, her role tightly aligned with keeping the pack mission ready. Her hazel eyes were sharp with a mix of concern and determination. We've got it covered, Gunner. Just make sure you come back in one piece. The pack will be ready to support whatever comes next. Gunner gave them each a small nod of appreciation before turning on his heel and striding out of the room, his pace unyielding as he headed toward the garage to find Eli. The soft hum of machinery filled the garage as Gunner pushed the heavy door open, stepping into the familiar scent of oil and magic-infused alloys. Eli was standing by a workbench, her silver hair slightly tousled, and her expression caught somewhere between irritation and begrudging amusement. Darren! She growled, her hands on her hips as she glared at the empty space where her alarms used to be. You are so dead when I catch you. Gunner arched an eyebrow, crossing his arms. What did he do this time? Eli spun around, startled, her violet eyes flashing with residual annoyance. He took out all my alarms, every single one. My work alerts, my backup alerts, even the one I set in case the first 5 failed. I woke up thinking it was 10 minutes later, only to find out it's been hours. Gunner smirked faintly. Sounds like he did you a favor. You needed the rest. Eli scoffed, running a hand through her hair. Oh, don't you start. I've got enough smart-ass comments to deal with from Darren. As if summoned by the mention of his name, Darren poked his head around the corner of the garage door, his signature grin plastered across his face. You're welcome, by the way. You look 10 years younger, Keebler. Eli narrowed her eyes at him, grabbing the nearest wrench from the workbench and pointing it threateningly in his direction. If you don't disappear in the next 5 seconds, this is going straight at your head. Oh, come on, Darren said, stepping fully into the garage. You needed sleep, and you know it. I'm basically a hero. Eli sighed heavily, her irritation giving way to a reluctant grin. You're a menace. That's what you are. Glad we're all in agreement, Gunner cut in, his voice firm but laced with faint amusement. But playtime's over. Eli, we've got orders. Aeliana's called us to Alphiem. The portal's opening soon. Eli straightened, her expression shifting instantly to focused determination. What's the situation? Something big, Gunner replied. She wasn't specific, but it's enough for the council to summon us both. Get your gear and meet me in the portal room. Eli nodded sharply, grabbing her toolkit and a compact satchel from the workbench. As she passed Darren, she jabbed him lightly in the shoulder with the wrench. This isn't over. Darren grinned wider, stepping aside. I'll be here when you get back. Try not to break anything important while you're gone. As Gunner and Eli exited the garage, the tension of the upcoming missions settled between them. Whatever waited on the other side of the portal, they both knew it would demand everything they had. And, for better or worse, they were ready. The secure portal room hummed with an ambient energy as intricate runes on the walls glowed faintly. Gunner and Clora stood side by side, both alert as the shimmering light of the portal began to coalesce. Eli entered moments later, her gear slung across her shoulder, still muttering about Darren's antics, but now focused and ready for the mission. The portal solidified with a sharp burst of energy, and before Gunner or Eli could step through, 4 elven figures emerged from the other side. Clad in gleaming silver armor adorned with the crest of Alphiem, they carried an air of authority. At their head was a tall elf with piercing green eyes and a lieutenant's insignia etched into his armor. His gaze scanned the room before locking onto Clora. "Lieutenant Phelan," he said, his tone formal but carrying a hint of warmth. "It's been a long time." Clora's hazel eyes widened slightly in recognition, a rare flicker of surprise crossing her face. "Lieutenant Arundel," she said, stepping forward. "I didn't expect to see you here. Last I heard, you were still with Silver Leaf." Arundel inclined his head, a faint smile gracing his lips. "I was, until your request to the Guardian Council changed the course of our unit. You saved us, Clora. It's an honor to stand here now, assigned to your division." Clora blinked, caught off guard by the sudden shift in the conversation. "Assigned?" Arundel gestured to the 3 elves behind him, their postures rigid and disciplined. "We've been tasked by the Guardian Council to serve Echo Division. Our primary mission is to guard this portal, which will now remain open as a secure connection between Alphiem and Earth. Secondary to that, we're here to assist in any operations that require our expertise." Gunner crossed his arms, his sharp blue eye narrowing as he sized up the newcomers. "And this was decided without consultation." Arundel met his gaze evenly. "The Council determined it was necessary for the stability of both realms. I understand the concerns, but we are here to aid you, not impose." Clora placed a hand on Gunner's arm, her voice calm but firm. "Arendel's word is good, Gunner. I know him. If he says they're here to help, they are." Gunner exhaled sharply but gave a small nod. "Fine, but make no mistake. Echo Division operates as a unit. You take orders from me or Clora. Clear?" "Crystal," Arundel replied smoothly, his expression unwavering. The momentary tension eased as Clora exchanged a brief knowing smile with Arundel. Gunner turned his attention back to the portal, his cybernetic fingers flexing slightly. "Let's move," Gunner said, stepping forward. Clora lingered for a moment, her gaze locked with Arendel's. "We'll catch up later," she said quietly. "Looking forward to it," he replied, stepping back with his unit to take up positions near the portal. With Eli at his side, Gunner stepped into the shimmering light of the portal, the familiar pull of its magic enveloping them. Clora watched as the glow consumed them, her mind already shifting back to the duties that awaited her on Earth. The portal pulsed once before stabilizing, its connection now a permanent bridge between realms. The 4 elven guards took their places, their presence a silent reminder of the growing ties and challenges between Alphiem and Earth.